So
Okay,
welcome everyone.
welcome. It's nice to have everyone here. This is a good subject for this period of time, and we're going to talk more about why it's a good subject for this period of time. Well, we all know why, but anyway, we'll get deeper into that. So before we begin, I just want to take a moment, and we will do an invocation. So just to bring ourselves together. So just take a moment. You can have your eyes open or closed. It's up to you. Just take a moment. If you can, have your feet on the floor. That's always a good idea, just to kind of ground yourself. And take a deep breath. Inhale and exhale. And just let it all go. We've come together in this place and time, out of space and time, to join together and to focus our attention on the events of the day, the events of the recent past and the possible future, and just to come together, have a conversation, share ideas, support each other through this period of time, to share our wisdom and experiences, and just create community. Because together as women, we are powerful, supporting each other, and we can do so much together, even if it is just to hold space for each other. So let's remind ourselves of that. As we breathe together, as we sit together, as we have tea together, as we speak and discuss. Allow your wisdom to grow. Allow yourself to grow. Allow yourself to be seated by other people's ideas. Just sit with them. And as we come together and reimagine our future, let's just take a moment and settle ourselves down and really bring our attention to the here and now, to this moment, as we all come together. Take another deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. And just open your eyes. Okay. So again, thank you ladies for coming. And as Keren has already said, you can have your video on or off for this portion. We ask you to keep your microphones off just so that we get a good recording, and then we'll have everybody put them on when we get to the discussion piece. So we've come together, and many of you, I'm sure, know many of these things. I haven't done an introduction of Keren or myself because I did send you an email that had our bios and to give you an idea of who we are. So I'm going to skip that piece. And I really just want to talk about, before we go into any more of a discussion, really just talk about what's going on right now and why we chose this particular moment, this particular day. So we are having a Venus transit, and Venus has a retrograde motion for 40 days. Now that started on the 13th of May. But what happens, just to give you a little explanation of what happens with Venus and why I think this is so important, is that at some point in time, she disappears from the sky. So Venus has been the evening star, called Venus Hesperus. And then she disappears for a period of time, and then she re-emerges as the morning star, which is Venus Lucifer, the bringer of light. Now, Venus and Inanna are very much related, and we're going to talk more about that. But that concept of the that disappearing from the sky for that period of time is a descent. So always it's nice to take the energies of the day. If you work with astrology, and even if you don't, this is a good opportunity to do that, to use these periods of time that come up, these auspicious moments, and to really tap into that energy. So today, the 28th of May, is when Venus disappears from the sky. So she went retrograde on the 13th, then on the 28th, she disappears from the sky. On the 3rd of June is the conjunction between Venus and the Sun. And then there's another period of time where she's still invisible. So she becomes visible again on the 10th of June. And then the retrograde finishes on the 25th of May. So I want to read those dates to you because otherwise I'll screw them up. But this is really when she takes her descent. That's what's starting now. That's what's happening today. So this is why we wanted to use this moment in time, because I think the greater moment in time that we're all going through with this pandemic is a kind of a descent, and we're going to talk more about that. But okay, so we're going through it collectively in this bigger picture of what's going on. But now we have this moment. Now we have this moment to really focus our energy and to do that work. So that's why we chose today, the 28th of May, as Venus disappears. She has been the evening star. She's going to disappear, and she will reappear again as the morning star. And I'm going to do a storytelling on the 3rd of June, and I'm going to talk more about that at the end of the actual descent. But I think that this is an important story, and this is something that Keren and I have worked with a lot, discussed a lot. So we were having this discussion again about this and this descent, and we said, why don't we do a gathering about this? Why don't we include other people and share our own experiences? So so that's really why we chose this moment in time. We want to talk a little bit about the mythology of Inanna. Now, there are many descents. Inanna is the one that really calls me. I think Keren, I think Persephone at least used to be the one that really spoke to you.
Yes, until it wasn't, until Inanna just kind of leapt out at me, yes.
So I think there are many stories of descent in this journey to the underworld, and it's always about coming back with gifts. So I think that's something to really focus on. And again, we have this period of time. Venus and Inanna were very closely related. Inanna was called Inanna of the evening star and Inanna of the morning star. So she was really very much related to Venus. And that's the thing, you're going to find the same mythology in all different cultures. And very often it's the same story. Inanna and Ishtar are really the same story, but they were different cultures, and the different cultures very much overlapped. So the stories are the same, or sometimes they begin to morph into different things. But I don't know, maybe we should, do you want to start with your experience, Keren? Or I think that's a good place to start, to kind of make it real before we before we go into the mythology of it.
Yeah. And I might backtrack just for a second, very briefly, just to give some context around this idea of initiation as well, which I think is related to descent. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about, what's the difference? Is there a difference? How do they relate to each other? But yeah, I've always, for years, and then I realized it maybe more so in the last couple of years, that my life path seems to have been defined by the series of kind of initiations that I've had. And it's just the way I've chosen to describe it. And I've always had a fascination with mystery and initiations from the time I was trying to figure out the secrets of my father. He was a Freemason, kind of a patriarchal version, but there were initiations and mystery. And then I became very interested in this Persephone myth. And I feel like it was I was living that myth in my 20s. And now I coach wise women who are going through what I consider initiatory journey of midlife. So that's why these ideas are always swirling around in my mind. And so to the story of kind of how I came to this Inanna place recently, I went on holiday March 12th, which was literally the very day before the world started to shut down. And at the time we just thought, oh, it'll blow over. We had no idea, right? None of these terms, social distancing, they weren't really a thing yet. It was just like this kind of vague thing. And I guess I was in that stage of kind of denial, and I'm getting my vacation. So we left for the US. I live in Canada. And we had the best time we could as kind of things began to shut down. And we came back a week later on the 19th. And obviously we traveled, by plane, and because I don't like to go through the, those big things, those, what do you call them? The security thing where you have to lift up and you get radiated all around. I opted for the personal pat down. And I don't know why I was so focused on the EMF issue, and that it didn't occur to me that I was perhaps putting myself at greater risk. Whether that was the deciding factor, I don't know. But 3 days later, I became sick with, I didn't check all of the COVID boxes, but I checked most of them. And the day before, which happened to be my birthday, which I don't know if I make meaning of that or not, I had the most visceral feeling of physical anxiety. And I'm not prone to that. I've never really experienced it. And I experienced it as I can't breathe. There's a tightness in my chest. And my mind really took over in a place of anxiety and panic, which I had been kind of fighting while I was away. The only thing that kept me sane was that this sort of return to the feminine in the form of the ocean, because I would go there every day, and I just kept thinking, the ocean doesn't know anything about COVID. It was so deeply nourishing, but then I would wake up in the middle of the night with this sort of fear. So by the time I got home, I think I'd locked in this kind of mental construct that, I'm going to get it because I was traveling. That's what everyone was saying at the time. If you travel, you're at risk. You've got to go home and quarantine for 14 days. So, that day, I think that thought, I'm definitely getting this, just took over. Whether it was a premonition, whether it was just something that crashed my immune system, I guess I'll truly never know. But I do feel it was something my soul needed to happen. And so I went from this total anxiety to the next day getting a fever. And then it was like, okay, I might be in this thing now. I don't know, but it was like something else took over, and there was just this knowing, like in that moment, it was like, oh, this is an initiation. I can't say that it was just a knowing, like there's no way to explain how I came to this, that it just popped in, and I'm like, okay, so I need to access, instead of this place that I was in yesterday, that is not going to serve me. I'm going to have to access a higher knowing. But this is a descent. This is some kind of initiation. And so I just got very calm as much as I could. I got into a kind of a surrendered place, a place of acceptance. And except for, and it was really about knowing that you're going in, that you're descending. I didn't have a sense of Inanna at that point, because Persephone had always been my orientation, and it didn't feel like that. So it was just like, okay, but I'm gonna use this time to lean into this. What is this? The virus is a messenger, and we actually know medically that, and I'm not a health professional, but I've worked with a mentor who's been talking about this. She's an MD, and she's been talking about how the virus is actually a piece of information. It's RNA. And so it's a message. So if you replace the word virus with message, it's like, did you get the message? That's like, oh wow, what a shift, right? In the paradigm. And so I think any initiation is about an expansion of consciousness. You know, we have these rites of passage that we go through that can be initiatory. I think this whole time collectively is initiatory, because we're moving from something to something new. And in order to do it, we have to go inside. Literally, we have to go inside into our homes. I mean, it's the perfect setup, right, for an initiatory journey. And we have to descend by going inward. And we're not ready to birth the new yet. We haven't quite made the ascent. But in my personal journey with whatever this messenger was, and it was a good 3 weeks really before I had regained my energy. It was mildish, you know, and I have to say I'm blessed that I was able to even see it as an initiatory journey. If you're in true survival mode and you know really physically can't breathe, that's a whole other story. But I had just enough of whatever it is that you know, I couldn't do anything but really go in. So I just kept leaning into it, asking the questions, listening in, you know, writing, connecting in. I watched a lot of webinars, and I definitely, you know, I can talk about the descent maybe later on in the conversation, but there was a point at which there was a realization that this was an Inanna experience, as I literally, and maybe Leslie, you want to talk a little bit about the story and just kind of, you know, high level about the Inanna descent. But it's basically about coming to become stripped down as Inanna goes through the 7 gates. She's stripped of her clothing, and it felt like that. I was being stripped down of all of the beliefs that I'm still holding about certain things, and the gap. For me, it was like about the gap between where I want to be and the work that I do, and the parts of me that still maybe don't totally believe, or where I'm kind of playing a role. And so all of that got stripped down, and what came out was more authenticity. Yeah, I mean, there were so many pieces, but that was kind of a big piece. And also this idea of, you know, Inanna, at the first gate, her crown comes off. And so the question is, can you be in your own inner sovereignty and authority? And that's what the ascent part of that is about. And so it's a fascinating story. I didn't connect to it until, I guess, whenever I was ready. And then suddenly again, there was like this knowing. And I didn't know so much about Inanna, except actually through Leslie, when I had taken a course a couple of years ago about it. And at the time it was like, oh yeah, you know, it was kind of an intellectual, to some degree, understanding. But this was like, oh. And then I would read about it afterwards, and it kind of clarified everything that I had thought. But it's a time of expansion. And I'm not saying, you know, you need to get any kind of virus in order to be initiated or to take this descent. We can sort of, to some degree, I think, choose it. I'm wondering, Leslie, actually, I'd love to throw this over to you. What do you sense about the opportunities in initiation and descent? Is it have to be something thrust upon us through some kind of an illness, or is it something we can choose?
Well, I think we need to go back to the concept of mythology, because mythology, these were teaching stories, and they were read, they were told, they were told, or they were acted out most often. But the reason being that they are archetypal stories. So what happens is, you hear the story, you hear the archetype, you see what the challenges were, what they went through, and you know how the story ends. So it is a teaching story, and we learn how to do it. So in that sense, I think going through the descent, either reading it or, as I said, I'm going to do it on the 3rd of June. I've done it with women before. We've done it in a group. And I think going through the process, whether you're listening to the story or you're going through a more active process, maybe of journaling the gates or the whole process, I think all of it is really useful. But in the end, always, the most perfect and the most potent is going to be when the universe aligns and decides that you're going to do this. So I think doing it and working with it consciously is a really good way to prepare yourself. Like for you, you weren't that familiar with the story. You've always resonated with Persephone more, but you knew the story. And at some point you thought, oh, okay, this is what's happening to me, and now I get it. And I'm sure that as soon as that happened to you, then you were in a whole different place of, okay, I don't know, maybe I don't know the story very well, but I get what it is. I understand that I'm on this journey and that other women have taken it before, because that's one of the gifts that Anana comes back with at the end, is to be the one that has gone and come back. And I think that is, again, that's that wise woman archetype too, because wise women have walked the path. They are the way showers or the way seers, because they've done it and they've come back. They've survived whatever it is and they've come back. So I think, yeah, I think we can do a lot with it. I think we can work with the story a lot in order to prepare ourselves. If you'd known the story better, you probably would have even like, oh, okay, that's the first, yeah, there's the first gate. All right, I see what's, you know, and it not, I think it would just, it eases, it gives you some kind of comfort to know the map of this journey that you're taking. But one of the things that I want to say that we have talked about before is that an interesting piece of the Anana story is, and this I think goes back to the question that you just posed, that she hears a call. And again, that happens in different ways. Some say that she put her ear to the ground and she hears her sister calling her, you know, whatever it is, something happens and she hears a call. And I think that you heard that call, because as I told you in our last conversation, I spoke to you just before you went on this trip. And there was something in what you said that led me to believe that you knew you were going on a journey. You knew that this was going to happen to you, and you were saying, no, I'm not going to go into that mindset. I'm not, you know, I'm not going to go into fear. I'm not going to go into all of that, you know. And it's like, okay, but if you're called, you're called, and that's it. So I think that there really is a lot to be learned from working with any mythology, any of these stories. And I do think that even though we're talking about, mainly we're talking about Anana's descent and the relationship to that, and Venus and the period of time that we're in, they're all important, and they all show us kind of different aspects. Like, to me, the whole Persephone Demeter story is a lot about the one that was left behind. Persephone is the one that makes the descent, but a lot of that story is about Demeter being left behind. So there are these issues that come up with these different issues that come up with different stories. But in that one, there's a lot of grief that comes up. So those are all different emotions and things that we can work with that I think are really important on our spiritual path. So again, I really want to encourage women during this particular Venus astrological event. I guess we could call it a transit. I mean, it's moving, so it's transiting. So I'm not sure what the official word for that is, but yeah, I think it's important to work with it, possibly when you're not in the middle of it to get to gain some familiarity with it before you actually get into that situation.
Mm. Yeah. And I was thinking too, another answer to this question about initiation, is it something that has to be thrust upon you, or is it something you can choose at a particular time? We know this, but we've forgotten as wise women. This is some of the work that I'm doing now with women that I love, and I've been practicing it myself for a number of years, is every lunar cycle, there's the descent and the time during the dark moon, the time around the new moon, of being in the unknown, being in the mystery. And then there is again light and an ascent, and then you come out. If you do this work every lunar cycle, it becomes less scary, I guess, because we don't want, intellectually, right, our heads don't want us to descend or initiate into anything. Why would we want to go into the dark? And yet that's actually when you surrender to it, right? I mean, I'm just thinking,
Yes.
like in the mainstream, right? There's this idea, we don't want the dark, we don't want death. And that's a big piece we haven't talked about, is this idea, which is in the Inanna story, which I did face mentally, although I would say not physiologically, the fear of death. We're all, to different degrees, we have been at some point in this whole thing, if we're listening to the mainstream media, right? It's about running away from death. It's about our fear of death, and to what degree are we willing to die to everything. This is what one of my mentors talks about, in terms of this dark moon time. You have to be ready to let go and die to everything you think you know about yourself, that the stuff that's really in your soul's blueprint doesn't go away. It comes back because it's you, it's who you truly are. But all the other stuff, emotions, beliefs, stories, identities, subpersonalities, all that stuff, can we be willing to die, let all of that fall away? That's the Inanna story, as well as the story of the dark moon and what we can do. So,
but it's the archetype of the universal feminine. I mean, I think I want to go way back to where you started that sentence or thought, which is with this objection sort of can I choose this? Why do you want to be in control? I mean, that I think is the first question, is like, this descent is not controlled. It's about surrender. So yes, we can practice it and we can do the best we can, but that's all to build our muscles and strengthen our muscles. So when it does happen, the dark night of the soul, or whatever you want to call it, we're ready for it. But it's not going to not happen. And I think that whole concept of surrender is especially difficult for Westerners, but it's the feminine. And in my opinion, that is death, surrender. These things are the universal feminine, and we need to bring them back into our consciousness. If we were not afraid to die, our whole world would be different. Surrendering would be very easy. And so why are we afraid to die? If we are people doing spiritual work, most probably we don't believe that this is the end. So, so why should that be a fear at all? And I think that's the first question, is why do I have a negative, why am I afraid of the unknown? Why do I have a negative concept about death? All of these things are the feminine. And I think that it was lost from our consciousness completely as women as well. And we need to, that's the dark sister. She's all about death. That's the dark moon, is that death piece, and it has to be part of the cycle. Constant growth is Cancer. And that's the problem. We need a death cycle. We need to bring the concept of death back in without making it something bad. It isn't, letting go is a good thing. Letting go is, when there's too much, you let go of things. But we have that concept that it isn't a good thing. And like I said, I think that is part of the universal feminine and something that we need to re-embrace. And then that takes us into that whole thing of surrender, and that that divine moment will come for the initiation when everything in the universe is perfectly aligned. So in my mind, I don't want to choose the time because I'm not that smart. I'm not that clever. I don't know when that divine moment is. And I know that I don't know, and I'm okay with that. So I can keep going. I can keep practicing. I can keep doing the work. And then when the moment does come of this descent, I'm better prepared for it. And then sorry, if you're hearing all the sirens, don't know what's going on. I am somebody that suffers from anxiety. So I'm like taking, taking the descent often. But again, I've had to work with that. And now when I start to have a panic attack, I say, oh, I'm on another adventure, you know, and I don't know where it's taking me, but I know that it's taking me somewhere really important. So I think that, yeah, the first thing is to re-embrace those feminine concepts. And again, a good way to do that is through this story, because we take the descent, we see that we do come back. I remember when I used to do it as gatherings at the center, that there was one close friend of mine who would never come. And finally we had a conversation and she said, I'm so afraid. And I said, you're afraid of what? You know, I want to come to this, but I'm afraid. What are you afraid of? And finally it was that she's not going to come back. And I said, of course you're going to come back. I mean, that's part of the story. Ninja War, that's her role, is that if you don't come back after 3 days, somebody comes to get you. That's one of the roles of women, is to retrieve somebody. If they are having trouble coming back, that they are retrieved. And then they have the comfort of that. They know that they will be retrieved if something happens. So, yeah, I think, and not, that was never one of my fears. So I never thought of that. So it was good that somebody else told me that, and, you know, and I could have a perspective that wasn't my own. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, you made me think too of this idea of we can be afraid also to feel our feelings, right? It's very related to that. And that comes up a lot. And that's been part of my journey. So you know, I think all of these things are really connected. I wanted to come back to your, you mentioned the dark night of the soul, which of course is another way of expressing this idea of descent and initiation. And yeah, I did experience the whole thing, and it was reflected back to me afterwards. So yeah, this whole thing was a dark night of the soul. And interestingly, in my personal journey with this, I did have one specific very dark night of the soul, which was when I really had to come face to face with the chaos, you know, up here. Again, I told myself it was like another anxiety attack. I was very calm through the whole thing once it started, except this one night. And I really did get into a dark place because I told myself, I was noticing that I was exhaling. And when you think about it, exhaling that's the descent, right? Every time we breathe, the exhale is a letting go and a descent. But I was noticing that it was taking me a really long time. And I know you do this in breath work sometimes, right? You hold after the exhale, you hold it and then you inhale. I just noticed that I was really taking a long time naturally. And I had the thought, oh my God, if I fall asleep right now, I will not, I'll forget because I need my brain to tell me to breathe. My brain got a hold of this idea, and it was a battle for 2 hours. And I should say, you know, I never actually had that particular physiological symptom, which is the main thing everyone's afraid of not being able to breathe, except when I got in here about it. So I had to battle for like 2 hours. It was quite late at night, so you don't have all your normal resources. But I kept trying to fight sleep, and that was horrible. And I started to become I thought I was going to actually lose consciousness because I was so freaked out. Eventually I had to get, you know, some kind of a tool in place, and I couldn't think of all the good stuff I would normally do. All I could think of was, okay, my mind needs a mantra. And what was missing was the surrender piece, like to really go, if I die, I die. And you pointed that out to me when we were talking about this. And maybe I had a little bit of it eventually, once I got the brain to just be diverted. I just made up a mantra: I am peace, I am light, all is well. And just like enough to, and I knew, I can't go on like this. I just have to be willing to like let be what is going to happen and trust. And of course, I woke up the next day and it was just fine. But it's like you really come to meet your fear of death. Like that is the number one thing that happens in these any kind of initiation like this. And there is an expansiveness that happens afterwards. I really did feel like there was an expansiveness in the third eye. There was an expansiveness in kind of what I was, I always think and talk about this spectrum of what, on our path, there's certain things we think that are way too out there and woo woo. And that the place you are on the path, it moves, right? Like what feels like is possible or could be credible moves as you go through the journey. And it felt like there was a bit of a leap that happened at the end of it. And I don't think that would have been possible. It's not possible to have that. You can, through practices, it comes slowly, and surely, but there's a time, it's like the layer of the onion, how there are the thick layers of the onion, and then there's the thin ones. And I think those thick ones most often come with an initiation that just kind of happens, as you said, Leslie, when all of the stars are aligned, literally, right? The planets are aligned in your personal, whatever it is. And it's the perfect storm, so to speak. And then it kind of happens. And we can nurture it through the practices along the way.
An interesting thing about healing is that you actually don't have healing, and I'll explain this better in a minute, without a shock. So this is like, if you think about homeopathy, when we potentize a remedy, we're hitting it, because what you do is when you hit it, you drive it to the next energy level. So in order for us to move forward, we have to have a shock. Like there has to be a shock to propel us to the next level. Now that doesn't always have to be a bad shock. That could be a good, like some joy or whatever, but there has to be like this hit of some sort. So this, going back like to the initiation thing, I think that's a big piece of it, is that you're hit with this. So you're kind of propelled into something, and that drives you through that healing. Well, as soon as you know that, as soon as you realize, hang on, I'm not going to go to the next level, and shock maybe isn't the best word, but it's the only word I can think of at the moment. Something that like hits you. And and when you realize that, when you realize I need that shock, like I need that thing to happen to me, then I think you can also be more accepting. You're still shocked because that's what happened. That's what you need to drive yourself to the next level. But then you start to see it as a good thing. You start to see it as a positive thing. And I think that there's less resistance. And I think that this is a big part, or a big problem in first of all, in Western society in general, because we have that control issue, but in all of healing, like there's that resistance. We're always going to come up against that wall. And the only way to go through that wall is to hit it, is to drive it to the next level. And so that's what you're doing in homeopathy, is you're taking a remedy that is the frequency that you're at, so that everything crashes. So you break through, and if you took in science like chemistry, we have think of these different shelves of the atom. In order to drive it to the next level of energy, you need to hit it with something. So that's what our initiation, or that's what these shocks are all about, is actually to drive us to the next level. So if we let it happen, and I think so much of our problem is, pushing our feet in the ground, trying to not let things happen. And again, that takes us back to surrender. So I think typically Westerners cannot surrender unless they're forced into it. And to me, that's a big part of what's happening with this pandemic. Nobody would have stayed home. Nobody would have done it. It really is a reboot, because if same thing on your computer, generally you're not going to reboot your computer if you don't have to. Unless something went wrong, you're not going to just say, oh yeah, let me just do that. I think that would be a good idea. You're going to, you know, something's going to go wrong, it's not working, whatever, and then you reboot. So I think, you know, as a mass experience, we as Westerners are not going to surrender unless we're forced into it. So the universe will force us. The universe will force us into it. You know, and again, let's try not to resist. Like, let's see it as an adventure, and where can I go with this? Because I honestly do believe that the universe conspires with us, and we may go on a hell of a ride, and it might be really difficult, but I don't know, personally, those were the things in my life that were the most rewarding. So, but always to stop and assess what you did get out of any of those situations. That's the ascent. When Inanna receives, she loses all her gifts going down into the underworld, but she gets them back with wisdom as she ascends. And that's the thing. Then she knows what she has. Then she knows what this gift actually means and what it's worth. And that, I think, is a big problem. A lot of us have things, you know, wherever you're not having a problem at this particular period of time, you know, show gratitude. I mean, use the practice of gratitude, because it's really important to know what those positive things are at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I really have noticed so much resistance, you know, out there. You know, we are the authorities, right? The external authorities are really trying to control this outcome in every way. And there are some valid reasons for that. You know, I understand that. And, you know, as much as we can, particularly, and I do believe this is the women that will lead the way, because we do somewhere in our bodies, you know, even if we haven't understood it up here, and it's really about knowing it in the body, we're remembering. And so, there will be, if, you know, if we can lead the way, we can come out of this with the wisdom, you know, in order to really, I think what we're doing is we're trying to birth a new earth, and the only way we can do that is through this vessel and our own intuited practices of the going in, of the descent, and of the initiation. I am calling this the great initiation, because that's what it is, I feel. I mean, and that's based on kind of my, you know, we've heard it, the great pause, the great awakening, what else, the great reboot. I think I've seen that as well. Whatever you want to call it, you know, I think it's pointing towards the same thing, the same journey.
And I really think it's a return to the feminine, because it's the return to inner space and the awareness of how important that inner space is. Because you're saying, you know, governments are doing this and people are doing that. Okay, but that's all out there. Remember, I think this is the time that we can truly appreciate our inner space, our sacred space. And I hope that everybody's going to really see that your sacred space is about a boundary and who comes in. And now with this particular situation, we all have our inner circle of the people that maybe we're living with that are allowed into your home, and then others who are not. And yeah, I hope that loosens up a bit, but I think that discernment, I think that concept is something that we need to keep. Those are the things I think that are happening that are positive, that we need to remember. And Gandhi said, change happens in the shadows. The shadow is the feminine, the dark, the unknown. That's all the feminine. That's where change is going to occur amongst the feminine, the inner space. And then we take that out into the world some way. So I think we've all been driven indoors to remember, to reclaim our inner space, and to remember how important it is. And I think that's what's important about this reboot, is that again, you have to be kind of forced into it. And then when you are, you remember, oh, right, we all used to have dinner together. Or, yeah, I used to cook. Or, I mean, for me, that's the thing. I've been cooking, you know, that I used to cook all the time when my children lived with me. And then when they didn't, I stopped doing that. And wow, yeah, I need to remember, I need to reclaim all of these things. So I hope, again, people will reassess the things that they have reclaimed and try to keep those and take those into the future with them.
Yeah. There's another point that's sort of springing up to mind now, around, you know, this reclaiming and remembering. The other piece of that is it's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that we didn't want to look at. So we haven't really expressed it that way yet, but like the dark sister, like that's a part of us. It's not just a mythological story and a journey, it's part of us. And so, you know, in some of the work that I'm trained in, it's, you know, it's looking at this, the idea of wholeness, is the only way we're going to get to unity in the world, which I think is what we're trying to do right now, is to get beyond good and bad and all of the polarities that we think are other, that we don't want to claim for ourselves. And so a big piece of this is looking at the parts, the beliefs, the stories, but the parts of us, you know, my inner martyr, my inner victim, my inner bitch, and also the amazing parts of us, you know, my glorious artist self. And but we need to reclaim, and the only way to do that is to go within and to really to be willing to find them and to accept them, you know, into our heart as part of who we are. And when we can all see that all of those things that we're, you know, projecting our fear and our anger onto are also, this is in me too, I don't think we can get to, you know, this next place. And I think it's up to, again, the wise woman that can see the dark and the light and the gifts of all of it and how it's all part and parcel of who we are. Then maybe we can lead the way for others.
But this is what's so important about a spiritual practice, or having that time of isolation, is that you do have to face yourself. And I think we've spoken about this very often, that the winter time typically is the time of going inside, or the time of the dark moon is the time of going inside. So normally, naturally, we have these periods of time where we retreat, which of course doesn't happen anymore. We have, you know, that expression 24/7 is more real than anybody wants to realize. No, there are these cycles. Everything is not all the time. Things should not be open all the time. You know, we shouldn't be available all the time. If you get sick, go to bed. And I'm sure that's why this disease spread so horribly, is that people were sick and they still went to work. If every time you got sick, you stayed home and you isolated yourself, these things wouldn't have gotten out of hand in this particular way. We need to do that. We need to honor ourselves. That's part of self-care. And there has to be a structure that allows that to happen, in the sense that it will be acceptable. If I'm sick, everybody else now will realize, oh yeah, we don't want you to come to work because you're sick. You know, that has to be the new consciousness, is that when somebody says, you know, I don't want to do this, or I think I should be by myself, that everybody says, yeah, okay, good, yes, please do that. So our thinking has to change, that there are cycles within our own body, within the seasons, to have that period of retreat. Again, that goes back to the death and rebirth. The feminine is all about cycles. We can't be in a constant state of growth. Even like with women, this is part of the problem with our cycles. We are supposed to be aligned with the moon. We should bleed on the dark moon. But now that there are lights everywhere, our brains are not producing the correct chemicals to make that to happen. So that's almost that constant on thing. And we see what it's done to us, how we don't sleep well, how women's periods are everywhere because light is constant on. No, we need those cycles, and
Yeah.
and however that they're going to happen. So that, going back to what you said, that time of isolation where you face yourself. We're in a world of distraction. And again, I think, yes, we still have distraction. We have the internet, we have Netflix, we have all these things, but it's not the same. It's still, if you're at home, finally that's going to get boring. And maybe you're going to read a book, or you're going to do some journaling, or you're going to start dancing, or you're going to, and again, I think it's only going to happen when we're pushed to the edge and we're forced to try something else. Maybe I should learn how to draw at this period of time. So I think that, these are all the positive things that are coming up. And I think we probably should kind of round this up because we do want to have time for discussion. The only one other thing I want to mention, and then I think we want to talk about things that are coming up, is you were talking about breathing, about that fear of not being able to breathe. Breath is all about grief. And so to me, it's so interesting that that's what's being affected here, is people's inability to breathe. Again, that's one of those things that comes up a lot in the Persephone myth, is that grief. We need to allow ourselves to experience grief. When somebody dies, everybody is, are you okay? Are you okay? No, just let the person grieve. You need it. It's a process and it needs to happen. So fear, that's one of the things we don't acknowledge. Grief, all of these are the dark sister, and these things that come up in these mythologies of the feminine. These are our big emotions, betrayal, all these things. And they're things that we're not dealing with. So I think we can learn a lot from the mythology and reading those stories and working with those stories before we ever get to the situation where we actually have to deal with whatever that is. So I think, do you have any last thoughts, or let's talk about moving forward?
Yeah, no, I think we've covered everything. Of course, there's more and more layers, and we will. I know that we are going to do some more things. You're going to do the storytelling on June 3rd, and I'm going to be doing some more discussion about different things just to dive a little deeper. And then we've got a little thingy in the works with also another collaborator, Susan Matthias, that we're kind of working on right now, which will be an even deeper dive for people who are interested in kind of really looking at this in their life, looking back, looking at now, looking forward, and really about becoming the wise woman. So or remembering the wise woman, because we all it's just remembering. It's like that Michelangelo, he said, when I make a sculpture, it's all in there. I'm just chipping away to reveal this magnificent sculpture. I'm not making it, it's there already. So
Yeah,
I think
that's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, so I think maybe we should open it up. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, and just to
thoughts.
say that next week on the 3rd of June, I will be doing the storytelling of the Anana story, and then on the that's Wednesday, I think, and on the following day, I'm going to do kind of a debrief afterwards. But I think it's good to sleep on it, so I'll do the debrief the second day. But if you received the email to join this, you'll receive the email for that. So you don't need to register again. Okay, so I think we're going to open this up to everyone. So we can unmute everyone or you can unmute yourselves. It is being recorded, so if you don't want to be on the video, you can turn your video off. And please, if you're somewhere that's noisy, then please just leave your mic muted until you want to say something. But otherwise, go ahead. I don't know if you want to
Um,
unmute everybody or.
yeah, I'm just wondering if we should, because we have 35 people, I think, more or less, I wonder if we should do the raise hand. That can be a little tricky, or maybe I'll just switch to gallery view,
Mm-hmm.
makes it easier, and then you can just sort of
Yeah.
wave, and
Yes, that sounds good. Yeah,
that might
let's
be good.
switch to
Okay.
gallery
Okay.
and just raise your hand. But you can unmute yourselves unless
Gonna have
yeah.
to put my glasses on. Okay, I see.
Patricia, what would you like
Yeah.
to say? Huh?
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. This, with the thinking I've been doing lately, I've really just enjoyed listening to you so much. And it made me think of a question, especially regarding children. When a lot of times, I mean, you want them to act without fear, you want them to be facing up to things. But a lot of advice that comes out is in some ways to like fake it till you make it kind of things, in order to allow yourself to maybe show a part of you that's not developed. And I was just wondering if you had any advice or any thoughts about this type of thinking in order to give yourself bravery to do something, in contrast with what's being authentic. Because as you said, we've got so many parts of us, and I was particularly thinking of grandchildren at this time, and just if you had any insights in how to help them develop in an authentic way. That's all I'll say. Thanks.
I think that the fake it till you make it is not a bad thing as long as you realize that's what you're doing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think that's an approximation, and that kind of goes back to reading the story and becoming familiar with the story, because then you're doing as much as you can do until you get to the point where you do it all. So I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think, you know, fear, unfortunately, is such a big concept, especially in Western society, and you know the media just reinforces all of that. So with children and grandchildren, to keep them away from that as much as possible, and maybe to focus them on things like reading them stories, or forcing them to, not forcing, but you know, asking them to do creative things, because fear comes from a sense of helplessness. And I think doing creative things, even if it's drawing or cooking or whatever it is, I think gives you, it empowers you. It makes you be creative. So it shows you you can be creative, and to really kind of foster creative thinking, because that is what we want to do. We want them to not be afraid of the unknown, to really encourage them, you know, when they do something, that when they go into a room where they can't see what's there, oh, that was really brave of you to do that. You know, that's a really good thing to do. And yeah, I think though those would be my thoughts as far as
Hero's
working.
journey.
Sorry.
The hero's journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the heroine's journey is the descent, and the hero's journey is of courage and going out in the world. So, but fear is a thing that I think that we, again, that was a piece of the feminine. The unknown is feminine, and we need to become comfortable with that again. So I think just doing those kind of things, and what eases our fear is to have support. So if you have grandchildren, like to just, you know, reinforce that you're there, you know, you'll do it with them, or you can, or they can come and talk to you about it, or, you know, whatever, to support them through it. Yeah.
I wanted to add too, just less about with children, but in our own, you know, as women, the fake it till you make it. There's, you know, an aspect of that that is about the masculine, and you know, we have to be the authority, and all of that. And I think there is, like Leslie said, there's good aspects of that. It's sort of a dance, you know. On the one hand, we want to be authentic. On the other hand, you know, we want to be able to courageously step in to something that we know, you know, is where we're going. And sometimes, yes, there is a gap, and so you could call it fake it till you make it. But I think, you know, ultimately, whatever, you know, if we're artists in our life, the only way we can become artists in whatever we want, in whatever direction, is to do the art. And so we're not always going to do it with the same skill and mastery, or mistressing, mystery, MYS, I call it, you know, but we have to just start somewhere. And I think, you know, I know in my personal, in this journey, I felt like, and I sort of did say earlier that when I was sick this time, I felt like what it was showing me was, and what it was enabling me was, to kind of take another leap from kind of the part that was still a little bit faking it. I took a bit of a leap closer to filling the gap between where I want to be and where I am in my soul's path.
But I think that also brings in the whole concept of mastery, that, again, a very Western concept, that we should not do anything until we've mastered it. And that's ridiculous. That, you know, as an artist, for example, maybe we need to put our artist hat on, in that everything is an approximation, that we're getting closer and closer to what it is. I find this in my dance classes. There's so many women who don't want to do movement because they don't see themselves as dancers, because they didn't take dance classes. It doesn't matter. It's an activity. So we've got to get over that perfectionism and that idea, you know, fake it until you make it. What are you faking? If you're doing something, you're doing it. Maybe you can do it better, but that's not the same thing. Doesn't mean that you're faking it. I think that already, you know, first of all, we have to decide what is faking and what is practicing. You know, I'm going to keep practicing this. I'm going to keep getting better at it. I'm going to keep doing it until I do get to a point of mastery. That's not really the word I want to use, but, you know, some place where we feel really confident about what we're doing it. Nobody's going to feel confident in the beginning doing something new. But again, that's that artistic mindset that we play is the word. Yes, we play with things. So let's not say fake it until we make it. Let's say we play with it until we feel that we've really mastered it. And you can always find better ways. Maybe you think you know where the end is, but if you just play with it a bit, it will actually, you'll come to something better too. Yeah.
Let's see who else is waving. I just lost the view that I had. Maybe Leslie, you can see.
Dawn, I think you, yeah. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you are. Yep.
I wanted to mention another F as well. So not just faking it, but having fun. That's what I wanted to say. So that with grandchildren, obviously you're going to have fun because kids are all about fun. And being light-hearted and keeping a sense of humour and having a sense of humour. I think sense of humour and fun are very healing, and they help to move us on. When we get stuck, if we can laugh at something, it's not to say that you can't, you know, say, actually, I feel awful today, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and feel awful. But laughter and fun and sense of humour is something that can help to shift us as well. And also, of course, we notice that when we're with other people, so which at the moment is mostly happening through these Zoom meetings or looking at talks on YouTube or phoning friends or family. If you're talking to somebody who is light-hearted, smiling, laughing, having fun, have a sense of humour, then they can change your attitude and they can change your mood just like that. So it's incredibly powerful. So whether from masculine point of view or feminine point of view, I think fun is really important. Fun and sense of humour are vital.
Yes.
And that
And
goes for,
joy.
you know, when painting or doing your art or writing. So if you're writing, it's a way of not getting stuck. If I'm writing, sometimes I'll just start, you know, writing jokey nonsense or just something that will move me on. If I think, well, I'm getting too serious, and I'm just going to kind of, you know, disappear into myself, you know, with this kind of seriousness, and now it's sounding, what I'm writing is very pompous, or this isn't what I want to say at all. So then I'll you know, I'll swing it around and make it fun for a while, and then find my way through it. And the same with art as well. And you could say, you know, if I'm not having fun, why am I doing it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the truth, because sometimes, you know, there are serious sides, and there's something that you might really want to get out in your painting or writing or you know, sculpting or whatever your art is, dance. But I just felt that I really wanted to drop that in, the fun thing. Yeah.
I think that's so true. Joy is something, you know, joy, having fun. Yeah. When did we get
And we
so
lose
serious?
it, don't we? We lose our joy. We lose our joy. Sometimes that's easier to see in other people. You know, your heart sinks for somebody because you realise that their joy is gone, and you want to help them to rediscover it. But when we lose our joy, I think that's really serious. That's sad, and that's serious. Yeah.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that's an aspect of the feminine too, right? I mean, joy.
Yeah.
Again, one of my teachers, this thing that really struck me was we can ask ourselves this question: does this activity that I'm thinking of doing, does it allow me to fully express and embody the Great Mother? And if the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, you know? And when I think of expressing and embodying the Great Mother, I mean, it's not always joy, because there's, well, as we've talked about, there's the dark pieces as well, but joy is a big part. I really feel like the Great Mother wants us to enjoy and to be in full bloom, right? So yeah, I totally agree with that, Dawn. Absolutely.
Well, if
Yes.
there's dark, there has to be light.
Yes.
Yin yang, day night. You know, there has to be. That's the opposite and equal. So,
Yes.
I got my video going.
That's great, Dawn. I'm glad to finally see you, because we didn't have so much success yesterday in the call.
No.
Thank you. Yes, that's an important point. And I think we need to remember, I need to remind myself of that. That's definitely one of those things that I tend to get too serious and then stop thinking about having fun or where's the joy. And again, I think that's something that, you know, part of our programming, that we need to be productive. So we forget about just sitting around having a nice time. Maybe we'll do more of that now. Yeah.
And of course, there is that feeling of, you know, the descent, initiation. It's a lot of serious work. And it, you know, I mean, it is, and it's a way to joy. As we become whole, we're going to become more joyful.
And there's always celebration at the end, which I think that, again, we've forgotten to do. Very often because within the story, you know, when Inanna returns, there's joy and celebrating, and we really need to remember to do that. Like, each time we succeed at something, we really should be celebrating whatever that is. But I know personally I don't do that, but I should, you know, I should bring that back into my life and make that an important point. Yeah. Good. Anyone else? And for those people who do not have their videos on, you can just unmute yourself and start speaking if you have something to say. Yeah.
Hello. Hi,
Yes.
Leslie. How are you?
Hi.
I'm Nihal Omran.
Alhamdulillah. How are you?
I'm Nihal Omran. I'm very happy to be with you here. Long time. I didn't join before, but hopefully I'll be around for the third of June.
Good.
Um, I have to say, but just
I think you've done the descendants before, haven't you?
I did everything, my dear, with you. I'm thankful to
Yes.
Leslie for 10 years or more. Leslie have been the most precious guide for me, and her teaching have helped me all the cycle. I mean, Nana's cycle. It was an exception, and it helped me through all my life until now. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I will hear the story again. Very
Good.
helpful. Cannot stress it enough. But then I've been hearing everyone. I've been hearing everyone. Um, I think that the part which you said at the end, that every death leads to a birth. This has to be in our hearts. I think a definite thing. Being very sure, confident in the light of coming of the day, because in the moment where we are in the descent, in the depths of it, and it doesn't feel like the day is coming at all at this moment. But to be able to go through the journey and face the fears and live with the fears for a while. Could be a day or a week or longer or a month or a year. No one knows how long will be the journey according to the magnitude of the learning. But the day is coming, and having strong hope, or knowing, more than hope, not hoping, but knowing that the in the morning. This is only calm, and making sure there is assistance and help to be around having the hardest times. After learning to do this, it became I became familiar with the process, comfortable with it. So when I have hard time, I start to open my eyes and look for the tomorrow, the happy, the smiles coming after the hard times. So this is success for me, that I can
Yes.
look forward to the day after being in the darkness. And I started to feel like this doll that no matter how it was pushed, it comes back. It has the center of gravity in the middle, and no one can, it's a toy for children. No matter how you push it, it comes back to the center of it as a magnet in the middle. So this feeling was amazing for me, very new, but it made me feel comfort that I became this doll.
You'll always come back to the middle.
Yeah, to my center, to being grounded, as you used to say. But life is so changeable, so being grounded is not like a tree. I think you feel there's a bush coming from a side, and then you go back to the center again. Then you're pushed out of your center and then back to the center. Is the origin and the normal being by now, after experiencing the descent and ascent years. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
And again, I think that reinforces the reason to know the mythology, because yes, you know that the new day is going to dawn. You know how the story ends. You know what's coming after. So I think it is important to realize what's next.
You made me think too, Leslie, as you were talking about what you've been talking about the Venus descent, right? Venus disappears from the sky, but we know it's coming back up after a period of disappearing from the sky. It's that same concept. And the other thing that was coming up for me, as you both were talking, was this concept of radical trust, right? There's like a surrender, but there's also this radical trust that ascent is coming, that new dawn, and there will be some kind of a regeneration or rebirth at the end.
Yes. And the more we go through, the more we know that. the more times we make the descent, we know ourselves that we will be coming back. So definitely, like Venus. She makes her descent every 19 months or whatever it is. She is her cycle. So yeah, she's always coming back. Anyone else that would like to share something? Nada. Can you put your, yeah, there you go.
Yes. Hi, Leslie. Hi,
Hi.
everybody. I'm really grateful that you're hosting this discussion. I've been on a, yeah, I want to share like on a bit unexpected journey. I traveled while actually, yeah, everybody was staying at home. I was also staying at home. And then suddenly my husband said, let's travel to Sinai. I'm living in Egypt, and yeah, so I was like, Sinai, like, yeah, why not? Let's do this. And was at the same time, I was really going inward also. So I had two journeys kind of, like the external one, going to another place. Also, yeah, my husband and me, we just started living together. Yeah, so it was like also to get to know each other in a new way.
Extreme, extreme
Yeah,
relationships.
and at the same time, yeah, I also felt like I was really on my own. Like I didn't feel like getting to know any new people. Like I found my husband is making friends while we're traveling, hanging out with people. And I was like, okay, you go sit with this and this people. I was like, I just need to be by myself, and I just felt like I can't interact with people, and I only had yeah, a few phone calls with actually a friend who is among us now also, and otherwise I was really, yeah, in my own trip, and I have had very dark moments, and took some courage to keep believing that I'll come out again, but yeah, honestly I felt really depressed, and yeah, while I'm actually in a really beautiful place, like I'm at the sea near the mountains, like everybody would say, come on, you're in heaven, and how come I'm feeling so blue? But yeah, I felt, okay, I have to just surrender now, and at some times I really had to face fears and grieve, indeed, like what you're saying, Leslie. I think it's so true, like we're not taught how to grieve, and it's so important that we allow ourselves to, yeah, take time, journal, or yeah, do it in any way that suits us as women, like to take time for ourselves and to sit with those feelings, and then yeah, feel lighter every time, feeling a bit lighter after. And yeah, so I've done some of that, and yeah, I think now I start to feel a bit better, alhamdulillah, and yeah, I don't know, I just felt like sharing. So yeah, someone
Yeah.
said something about joy also, like of course, yeah, joy and humor, they're so important. And for me, I just felt like, yeah, I was in a place that I just can't be happy, and I just can't enjoy where I am and what I'm doing. And then I realized that, okay, there's a time that I have to indeed face all these feelings and fears and whatsoever. But then also at some point I just have to grab myself, like, come on, now I have to stop, and I have to also live in the present, like stop being so attached to my past, and the past that, yeah, I'm projecting fears because of things that happened in my past, and that makes me fear the future. So I started really to say, okay, now I just have to live now, and that made me then finally more able to enjoy the present again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's something else that this pandemic has made us do, is to live more in the now,
Yeah.
because you don't have a choice. You don't know what's coming tomorrow. You can't plan. People are saying, oh, when are you going to do another tour in Egypt? I have no idea. Like the airport isn't even open. How could I possibly plan anything? When things happen, when things start to change and we begin to understand what the new form is going to be, then we can make plans. But for now, we're in this situation, and we may not even know what's going on out there. But if we can know what's going on in our space and deal with whatever that is, then I think that's the best that we can hope for. And we in Egypt too, we just had our month of fasting, Ramadan. We just were still in the extended feast. It's supposed to be 4 days. They decided, no, let's just have it for a week. Okay, why not? What else are you going to do? So it was interesting because, you know, again, for me, Ramadan is like a time of going in more, you know, and a more spiritual, there's an energy kind of going on. And then the feast came, and it was like, yeah, we need to celebrate, right? We've just finished this month of fasting. Yeah, we need to celebrate. That's what feasts are all about, is about this celebration. And to remind yourself that, yes, after you take some kind of a journey, then celebrate what's happening afterwards, that you've gone through it. Good. Anyone else that would like to share? Yes, Luann. Go ahead, if you can unmute yourself.
Hi.
There you go.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I don't know if you have time to answer them now, but maybe it would be something for the future too. One is when you're, or at least in my experience, when you're in your earlier stages of going in the descent, you may not have that sense of knowing you're going to possibly come out on the other side. So I'm not sure what you might suggest having supports in place, and if you're not in that trusting that knowing place yet. My other question was about also discerning that sometimes when you're going in the descent, maybe it's not exactly what you're talking about, but I know sometimes you go to that place and you feel like discerning, I guess, whether it's yours or if it's someone else's. Like we sometimes carry the collective or others' feelings, sadness, could be other things, grief from the world now especially, but all the time. It doesn't have to be during a pandemic. We may be carrying others' stuff, so to speak. And I wonder if you could speak to that or maybe address that in the future. I don't know. I guess it's discerning what's ours and what's others, or doesn't it matter? Maybe it's just to allow ourselves to feel that, as you're saying, and then help embrace our own self, and whether it's ours or not, and then be able to offer it, come out whole and be able to offer that to the world, I guess. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yep. It makes a lot of sense. And I will just briefly answer the first part of your question, and because we're gonna, if you come to the storytelling, yes, there are things in place. And there's a character in Ninshibura, and she's the one that is kind of the midwife. She's the lady in waiting. She's the one that's going to help Inanna if she doesn't come back. So there should always be someone in place. We need a support system, but that support system has to allow us to go in. Now, when I talk about the descent, I think that you could liken it to depression, but when I say depression, I don't mean, you know, some kind of severe depression. I'm talking about that roller coaster kind of depression that we all go into. So these are two different things. If you have severe depression, then you need you know, help, you need assistance, and this is not, and I want to say that now too. If you are someone that's deeply depressed, I don't recommend that you come to the storytelling on the 3rd of June, because you need support. If you're going through something very traumatic, then you really do need support. So this is not that. So let me just make that point. But I think, as you said, we have our own personal journey, and we do have a collective journey. Now, the important thing with Ninshibur is that she's told that if Inanna tells her, if I don't come back, you have to help me. But she's allowed to take that journey for a period of time on her own. And I think that this is important, because what happens is if someone says, oh, I'm feeling low, I'm feeling depressed, everybody wants to pull you out of it. Well, go for a walk, do this, do that. No, I think we need to make the descent. Because when you hit the bottom is when you bounce back up. But again, I'm not talking about an illness. I'm talking about that roller coaster thing that we all go through occasionally. So we need to be allowed to make this descent. We can't constantly have people telling us that we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't go there and we shouldn't meet the dark sister. We're never going to be whole until we claim her. And so there's that piece, and there is this collective. We do take journeys for the collective. We're all in that now. I mean, I honestly, I feel that like the last 5 years of my life have led to this point. I'm finally, this is normality for me. So, but because of that, maybe I can help somebody else. Because I'm not stressed by the way the way things are around me, maybe I can support somebody else. So whether we're taking the journey for ourselves or whether we're taking it collectively, I think it's important. And do the journey, go through, see what the gifts are, see what you come out with. It's all important. So I think in that case, I don't think it matters whether it's yours or it's a collective. But Luann, your microphone is off. So if you want to say something else, turn it on. But anyway, so I think, yeah, I think we do it in many different ways. And I don't think that it's important to identify if it's this or that. Just do it. Just do the work. And as women, we do collective work. So I think that it's important. Yeah.
And Leslie, I just want to add on that. I really concur with that. I was thinking about, in my experience with this in the beginning, like that day before when I had all this like anxiety and I couldn't breathe. And it was physically speaking very unlike me to feel that way. And I remember one of the thoughts I had is, I must be just taking this on from the collective. And, I was trying to shake it off, but it wasn't shaking. And I was, a lot of like, analysis in my head. Is this the collective? Is this mine? What is it? And then at some point it was like, it doesn't matter. Just as you said, and we are part of the collective and we're one, on some level, we're one in the same thing anyway. So it doesn't really matter. And as it unfolded for me, I mean, I realized clearly there were many lessons and insights and gifts there. So yeah, I guess it must be for me. And it doesn't matter how you get there. You get there how you get there, and you just kind of surrender to whatever that journey is going to be to the best you can.
And there's always some resonance. So find that piece of yourself. Maybe it is a collective journey, but there may be a piece of you, and there's always more work that you can do. So just do it. Yeah. I think we're coming up on the end of our time here. So if anyone would like to make any last comments before we go or anything, otherwise, I think we should wrap it up. I'm sure you have other things to do. even though we seem to have more free time, maybe we don't really. All right.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I would like, if it's possible, just to briefly tell us a bit more about next week, please, June 3rd.
Yes. So I'm going to do the storytelling of Inanna's descent, and that will be, it's basically, and I will record it. So if you can't be there, it's most probably going to be at 8:00 at night. Sorry, that doesn't mean anything to anybody else. So right now it's 7, whatever that is. So 8:00 would be 6 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, which would be, I think, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Anyway, I will send you an email about it. But what we're going to do is I will do the storytelling. There will not be a Q&A after. The Q&A or the discussion piece like this will be the following day, because I do feel that it's important. I would recommend to you as an individual to do some journaling afterwards. But I think I always feel that it's important to sleep on something before you start interacting and sharing. So we will do
it's like
that
a journey.
The second day.
You'll take us like
Yes.
on a journey
Yep.
down.
We'll go through the mythology, and I will take you on the journey. And the following day we'll do kind of a discussion debrief.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Anything else before we sign off? Well, thank you, ladies.
Thank you
It
so
was
much.
nice to share with you and see where we go from here. I hope we'll do some nice things together moving forward.
Thank you very much, and greetings from North Carolina.
Thank you, Maggie. Thanks for being here. Yes, thank you, ladies.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
What part of North
Take-
Carolina? I just moved to Raleigh.
See, you may have friends here.
What part of
New friends, building new communities.
I'm near Asheville in the mountains.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Nice to see you.
All right.
Nice meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.